Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you have ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. I am your host, Patty Porter. My guest hosts, Dina Zametta and Stephen Kotev, along with our guest experts, will share our experiences, raise your awareness, and give you food for thought. We will share with you problem-solving strategies no matter what your situation is. At work, with neighbors or friends, family, and as partners. Tune in or join in the conversation every Tuesday evening. Well, good evening, everyone, and we continue our dispute resolution cyber style series with David Puckett. He's the founder and CEO of ResolvNow. I'm your host, Patty Porter, the Texas Conflict Coach. You know, it's quite normal for conflict to occur between businesses, consumers, and the ordinary person. Most of us don't have the time, energy, or desire to use the court system and enter a lawsuit. So how do we give the consumer and businesses easier access to resolving their disputes with technology-enhanced dispute resolution, TEDR, technology-enhanced dispute resolution? How do we unite conflict resolution practices like negotiation and mediation with various forms of technology? Consumers are often unclear and confused about how dispute resolution processes can assist, much less how advancing technology comes into play. So in this episode, Where Does the Conflict Go? Consumers using technology-enhanced dispute resolution, David will address 5 barriers which contribute to this confusion and the ways to create consumer awareness and an environment that is safe for participation. Now, our special guest tonight is David Puckett, and that's Puckett. He's the founder and CEO of ResolvNow and SettleNow.com. He has been in the enterprise technology consulting industry for more than 25 years. And his focus is the utilization of TEDR and dispute system design for online dispute resolution systems for individual, courts, and Fortune 1000 companies. David's company, ResolvNow, launched SettleNow.com, which is one of the world's leading online dispute resolution engines to include emotional intelligence and electronic negotiation. Now, he graduated from the University of Hawaii with a BS degree in political science, and he obtained his Master of Science degree in conflict resolution from Nova Southeastern University. And he is in the final year of classes as a doctoral candidate at the College of Education at the University of Florida. So tonight we would like to take live callers, and simply you do that by calling in the number 347-324-3591 and press the 1 key. And we already have a couple of people there already in the chat room. Thank you for joining us. And we invite you to type in either questions or comments that I can bring into the program. If you're listening by phone, you can simply log into blogtalkradio.com/Texas-conflict-coach, or you can participate in our Twitter feed using the hashtag conflict chat. Conflict chat is our new hashtag, and or follow me at Texas Conflict Coach, TX Conflict Coach. So, David, we've already introduced you here, and we're happy to have you as part of our dispute resolution cyber style series tonight.
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome, David. So, let's start off with a question, regarding our episode's title. For one of the things we had talked about is where does conflict go? And so for a consumer, a neighbor, or a business for that matter, where does the conflict go when it goes unresolved?
Wow. As we talk, Patty, the challenge in our side, of course, from a commercial sense, is getting consumers to even think, you and I and the professionals in the industry, we know what conflict resolution is. But if we talk to just general people, while everyone knows what conflict is, I guess everyone in theory could conflict resolution is, the challenge is to think about what do you do when you have the conflict and you want the resolution? What are your alternatives? I guess if it's serious enough and there's enough dollars involved, or if it's a divorce and, unfortunately you get a license to get married, you have to get you have to file a lawsuit to get a divorce. Everybody knows what the courts are for, but they don't see an easy way to resolve conflicts in any kind of common manner, if that makes sense. And that's what our challenge is every day, is what can we do. Remember, in our conversation, Patty, we talked about the word or the letters ADR, alternative dispute resolution, and it's a profession, and that we know what it is, but the consumers don't wake up and say, I want to buy myself some ADR, right? They don't know
They don't say
is.
that.
Or they don't say, hey, I want to buy myself some mediation, right? If they go to the courts and if the courts refer it and they give you a list of a mediator and you need to choose one of these and contact them, and it's this much per hour, and you need to do this before you can go to the next step, it kind of forces them into it. But the consumers don't wake up and go, I see mediation, conflict resolution, as an alternative, or could I use this in advance of filing a lawsuit? And if so, how? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and the thing about it is that, I think people mostly think about courts when they're thinking about a fight, a litigation. Now, you had a story, an example, one of the examples that that often comes up on the show is when we talk about neighbor conflict, and there's a fence encroachment or the trees hanging way over into the yard.
Right.
And they're like, okay, the neighbor's not listening to me, and then, then I'll just tear down their tree, and then before you know it, they're going to, court, or they're going to the community, they're not going to the mediation center, but they're going to small claims court. And so what is an easy way? And I guess we'll get into some of those easy ways in terms of online technology. And right now there's a lot of confusion for the ordinary person about where they do go. And so why do you think there is confusion? Because mediation has now been around for a very long time. And like you said, they don't wake up saying, I think about mediation in advance of, solving a problem or in the problem. So why do you think there continues to be confusion as that as an alternative?
Well, the story you and I talked and you just kind of introduced, I make it kind of simple. So you got a neighbor, and there's a fence encroachment issue. You lean over to your neighbor and you go, hey, your fence is on my property, and I'd like to move it a foot. And the neighbor looks back and says, no, it isn't. And you go, well, yeah, it is. Here's my new survey, and it's clearly 1 foot on the other side, and I'd just like to cooperate with you and move it. No, it isn't. So you still got one party at least that thinks there's a conflict, right? Still wants the fence moved, but the other party's going, no. So as you mentioned, we could go to the small claims court and file a lawsuit, which requires you to respond. Because if you don't respond, you get a summary judgment, right? So not until that impetus is put upon you do you have to recognize there's a conflict, right? Because if you don't respond to the complaint, then you're going to get summary judgment. So that pushes you, and it takes a court mechanism to do it. So in that classic conflict, in a commercial sense, and to pushing it back into the mediation, it's until both parties agree that there's that conflict and willingly see that, and then see, let's say, mediation as that alternative. Not until then do you look for something to do. But then again, you can't go to the yellow pages. I mean, I'm sure and certain no one uses the yellow pages anymore. But it's not like you can go and say, I'm going to buy myself some mediation, and and what does that mean? And we've been classically conditioned, and we want Perry Mason, right? We see the billboards where the attorneys hire me, but they just don't know what to do, and I think I'm not criticizing on an overall basis, but the mediation industry hasn't helped itself in any kind of branding message. Remember I said, and I got myself in trouble a couple of years ago speaking at ATR. I said, hey, folks, one of your all's problems is while alternative dispute resolution, ADR, means something to all of us in this room, it doesn't mean anything to the consumer. And until we can commoditize it and get them to understand it, they're not going to use it unless the court orders it.
So obviously there is still that, I think we've done a number of programs, and even my participation in a number of these conferences, a lot of consumers, and we have folks who are in the chat room who I don't know if they're consumers or if they're ADR practitioners or both, but obviously it's very clear that there's a lot of people who don't know what mediation is, doesn't understand what mediation is as an alternative, and if they do, many of them see mediation as just another court process. So
Sure.
Now what we're talking about is how do we move forward with that? In other words, where do we start to introduce, if the idea is where does conflict go and how do we give them more access, and so how does consumers begin to use technology in dispute resolution. But before we go into the technology aspect, you had talked to me a lot about some of the barriers to consumer confusion. So what are a few of those that you want to share now?
Well, I don't think, if we look at eBay as an example, there's buyers and sellers, and through the e-commerce-based transaction, they get in dispute. And eBay recognized that the only way to differentiate themselves to a trusted network, in my opinion, is really two things. One, PayPal, which deals with the trust financial escrow of the transaction. It makes people feel comfortable. But by them building the mechanism of the online dispute resolution capability, they've made it understandable to the consumer. They've made it highly usable to the consumer. And then we get these two statistics that we hear all the time is, more than 60 million disputes are resolved. And the real profound statistic, which is not necessarily complementary in theory to the mediation industry, I sure wouldn't want to be the featured speaker at the mediation industry convention and say 90% of the 60 million conflicts are resolved without humans.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, whoa, what does that mean? But they've made it simple because when you build that repository of 60 million settlements a year, ultimately, then you get intelligence built, and then the same dispute types that become frequent, you can look at that repository, build intelligence, and then make suggestions to people, and it makes them comfortable using it. Okay? So That being said, and they're obviously doing it better than anyone, and one of my primary competitors is Modria, and they're using the basis of that logic and that software that was developed and used at eBay. Our challenge as an industry, whether it's technology or not, is, again, commoditizing something that's recognized, understandable, and easy to use, and inexpensive. Remember what I told you, Patty, is the past president of the Florida Bar Association served a 2-year term and just completed this year. He said 60% of the population of the state of Florida is marginalized from the participation in the legal system, either economically or procedurally or both. So that's the majority of the population. But is it the court's fault? They got small claims and they got other things. They're economically barred from it. They can't afford the retainer at the law firm, and they're procedurally don't know what to do. I just think there's a huge opportunity if, as an industry, and I always say about my competitors, oh my gosh, there's so much business to go around. We could all be doing a lot of business, but we're all talking about the technology, and we're all proud of the technology, but we're not talking to the consumer of the ease of use. We're not telling them what they could do, and I think that's our failure as an industry. And by the way, we're by no means perfect either, and we're going through not a rebranding, we're going through a remessaging because our shareholders and some of our customers have said, we get on your site and we still don't know what you did.
So what does that tell you?
Well, we're missing it, and we're missing it because we're not messaging and go, this is an opportunity to resolve your conflict. It costs this. This is how you do it. This is what you can expect as an outcome. And it seems simple. I say it all the time. But when you try to put it on a website or you try to put it in a set of instructions or whatever, the consumer, who, like all of us, have a very shorter attention span, there's not an institutional push to go, this is how we do it, right? And so I tell you this, all of 2015, our company has spent, and we've hired a national spokesperson who will come out in 2016, purely around the messaging to the consumer. That we got great technology. Modria has great technology. Virtual Courthouse has great technology. We got that part fixed, or enabled. But what we don't have is a mechanism to explain it to consumers on how to use it.
So the idea is to, in the example you gave in Florida, and I'm sure other states are very similar, in the high percentage of people who are marginalized, like you said, economically, or don't, for some reason, does not have the easy access to justice to, fight whatever that is, whether that's the neighbor fight, the community fight with HOA, with your, a couple. It doesn't matter, consumer dispute with a business. It doesn't matter what it is. And so the messaging is one, how do we communicate the message about how to use the technology? But two, it's really about how do we give easy access, understandable way to the technology, e.g. access to justice using technology, and to resolve disputes. So can you give a concrete example in walking us through, for example, on what you provide as, now you call it Technology Enhanced Dispute Resolution, TEDR. So tell us, can you walk us through a concrete example? So if we had a consumer right now in the chat room and they're one of these people who have a complaint against a business or a purchase that they made with a refrigerator that came damaged, or the neighbor, how would they go about walking through your system to use this Technology Enhanced Dispute Resolution?
Well, Patty, I have to first go to laugh at myself. When you and I talked about your invitation to participate in this call a couple months ago, and I was still so proud of my brand, Technology Enhanced Dispute Resolution. And I picked that brand, or we did as a collective entity, because I said online dispute resolution is another one of those brands that's not yet understandable, and it means everything has to be online. And in fact, I think the beautiful part about mediation is that what happens in the mediation room. And so we've always fully recognized, like let's say Modria / eBay saying 60 million disputes, 90% without humans. Our TEDR methodology is the human is involved as a customer service person. Point one, as soon as the person is on our system, initiates a conflict and an invitation to the other party, they have a person assigned. I also shared with you, we see TEDR as and by the way, we're going to de-emphasize that as a brand because people go, Dave, I know you're real proud of it, but, they don't even understand dispute resolution and let alone technology enhanced dispute because you're not doing necessarily any better. So here, the exercise of what we're doing is this. We use facilitation.
Okay.
So our customer service people begin interacting with the conflicting parties in a facilitation mode, not mediation.
Okay.
It helps them use the software, get their complaint, get their discovery. Our software conflict diagrams the dispute. We have the ability privately or confidentially for the two parties to assign sort of a numeric value to the elements of the conflict, meaning what's important to them. That's all done with the help and assistance and guidance of facilitation. Now, just so the people on the call, and I know this is in conjunction or related in somewhat of Cyber Week, we think there's 130 graduate programs that over the last 20-plus years have issued master certificates and PhDs in conflict resolution. And we think these folks are probably some of the better trained people in the industry. No disrespect to attorney mediators or ex-judge mediators. They go get a 40-hour class like we do in Florida and you're a mediator. So what? Those who have these master certificates and PhDs, they've been taught the human factors, the cultural facts, conflict diagram. All that's what we do when we go through these degrees. So we're using those people in a phase that we call facilitation. But it somewhat, Patty, resembles the magic, for lack of a better word, that maybe paralegals and legal secretaries do, pushing the conflict towards eventual court hearing, right? The attorneys don't necessarily interact with the clients a lot until they have to go act in court. In our case, TDR, that these well-trained people who unfortunately go out and get master's certificates and PhDs and can't get a job, or they become a commodity like a non-lawyer mediator and they're marginalized to $80 an hour or whatever. What we've done is create a customer service function. These people hand in hand and build trust, do a little bit of conflict coaching, and do facilitation in a classic way to then get the majority of the case not settled, but commoditized and understood, and then hand it to the mediator, and then the mediator can be more effective during it. Does that make sense?
Right, and they're doing this, just to clarify, so if I was that disputant, am I talking to this customer service with a background in, graduate background dispute resolution, or is this all through talking through technology, all typing?
No. In our model, in the spirit of TEDR, is the humans communicate using the phone, chat, video conferencing, whatever is comfortable and preferred way to communicate. So that facilitator operating in a customer service capacity begins to have human dialogue in whatever form from point one. They have a problem with the discovery loading. They have a problem with understanding the software. After the software diagrams the conflict, they get to review it. It's a constant human touch.
Okay.
Some percentage, we don't have 60 million disputes yet a year, but in theory, we're expecting that some percentages of the conflicts will be resolved during the facilitation phase. But,
so that's that early intervention in terms of really trying to address that through that facilitation. Now, for listeners, can you distinguish the difference for them between what you're saying is facilitation, so they're having the human touch, they're doing video conferencing or on the phone, understanding their dispute one-on-one, maybe some little coaching, and if it doesn't resolve at that point, then they hand it off to the mediator, but there's a distinction. So can you tell the listeners the distinction between facilitation and what's happening different when it goes to the mediator, if it goes to the mediator for mediation?
Absolutely. And a good question, too, by the way. When I was getting my master's in conflict resolution at Nova, Southeastern, there was a requirement to take facilitation. And being that classic, technology, mediation, arbitration kind of mindset, I go, I don't want to take facilitation. It's not going to help me do what I want to do. But it was a department requirement. I tried to get a waiver. No, you're going to take it. And when I took the class facilitation, I sat in there and I started to try to break down. We all know the magic of mediation. If you've ever taken a mediation class, you'll hear that you have to be, you have to be neutral. A perception by either party you're not neutral, mediation fails.
Okay.
And I believe that, by the way. I think that's the secret sauce of mediation. I started to question myself, in facilitation, do you have to be neutral? In facilitation, as we're using it in TEDR, do you have to be neutral? And I think, yes, in spirit, but I think you get a tad bit more flexibility if you're seeing that you're not in the act of mediation: opening statement, group caucus, private caucuses, the methodology that we try to follow in mediation. And so I think facilitation gives you a bit more flexibility. You still remain neutral, but the two pieces of technology that are, or I don't even want to call it technology. One isn't. It's process, steps. And that's what people don't know about mediation or conflict resolution. They don't understand the steps. TDR or rsettlenow.com builds steps. I mean, if we do anything good right now on our website, and we're releasing a new one in January, we kind of have 4 steps laid out. We explain it. So we use emotional intelligence, and to my knowledge, definitely, I don't think any of my competitors, I haven't seen anybody in just the general professional discipline of mediation trying to use emotional intelligence. And there's a dozen or so respected emotional intelligence assessments, and so our conflicting parties have that opportunity when they log in the system, and sort of step one, to use emotional intelligence. And when you take two conflicting parties that agree to participate in this, we use the EQ2 emotional intelligence assessment, and our facilitators can set with the two conflicted parties independently and go, okay, here's how you score, just like a Myers-Briggs personality test, let's say, and it allows you to do a little bit of coaching, and then you know how in mediation, I think one of the most powerful things in mediation is private caucusing, and during private caucusing, we go, hey, it's you and I, Patty, in a conflict, and we're in mediation. Hey, Patty, would you care if I shared something with Dave? Sitting for me, Dave, would you care about that? That starts one of the more powerful aspects of mediation. So in the emotional intelligence side, the facilitator, in our case, who's certified in emotional intelligence assessment administration and analysis, can say, here's who you are as an individual. And if he or she sees the opportunity, they can say, Dave, would you mind if I shared something with Patty? Right? Because guess what? There's the barrier of all conflicts, the emotional act and an emotional interpretation. So we, in our testing, found that to be real powerful. Second and last, in this, some would say this is technology because of the name it's called, e-negotiation. One of my favorite competitors, a company called Smart Settle, Dr. Ernest Thiessen is the CEO of that company. I think they've been around for at least 10 years, if not 15. And if you look at their, kind of market message, and Dr. Thiessen's dissertation said, and I remember when I read it academically, and he made sort of a conclusion that if you use e-negotiation versus face-to-face negotiation, both parties would get 16 to 20% more than what they would settle for, sort of a botnet. And I thought that was profound. Guys, I thought, how can each party get 16 to 20% more? It mathematically, it just see statistically possible. But if you look at, I think Dr. Thiessen has this little story on his website. You got two people fighting over an orange, and they're arguing. If a mediator, an attorney, or an adult walks in, they go, take the darn orange and slice it in half, and this is over. Isn't that what we always try to do? Is just settle. But we really don't even ask people what they want to settle for or what they're even fighting about. We just want to get it done. And so Dr. Thiessen's scenario, which is, I've seen it academically, is what if one person wanted that whole peel for zest, and they're just, I need the whole orange. One dude just wants the fruit. Or if there's a third person, they want the seeds to plant an orange tree. Or in theory, all three conflicting parties could get 100% of what they want, but the mechanisms that we go about it don't often ask what they want, right?
So,
in e-negotiation, go ahead, sorry.
Well, no, so I think that's what you're getting at is in the facilitation process that you're offering, this human touch, this customer service, this facilitation, is really what's coming to mind is like this facilitated e-negotiation, this facilitated negotiation, and the hope is that they get, well, the percentage is 16, 20% more, but that they might actually have more success in using someone who's a facilitator who might be conflict coaching, who might be using an EI, which is a unique aspect of your to EDR, before it goes to mediation, if it ever has to go to mediation. So am I understanding that right? It's like a facilitated negotiation, but using technology?
Yeah, Patty, but I think it's more simple now. Like, I debate all the time, is it really technology? When you say e-negotiation, everything about that's technology, right? That's electronic.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Right, but it can be executed in a very untechnical way. It begins with diagramming the conflict, and any of us that's been classically trained in conflict resolution, even some mediators, depending on the methodology, we kind of try to, break down the conflict into a conflict tree or whatever. You put the elements. So, e-negotiation, in our software, as an example, how we take it, we have a red side and a blue side. So when you diagram the conflict, everything's on the red side because that's what you're in conflict about. These are the things you're fighting about or you're in conflict about. You assign a numeric value private so each party doesn't get to see it. And then you go through this exercise of e-negotiation where you assign a numeric value. And the facilitator, guess what? And then there's back to that independence scenario. He or she is able, one, you see the emotional aspects through the EQ, emotional intelligence assessment. You go, oh, my God, if we could just get these people to understand that part of it. Now they get to see really kind of almost how they want to settle. And they practice, much like a mediator, just facilitated discussion about that. But cool thing is, let's say they move 2 or 3 things from the red to the blue, and there's 2 or 3 things left. And they've exhausted their time. We're in a business to make money, so we can only spend so much time in an allotted amount of time of depending on the price package of facilitation. But when a facilitator picks up the phone after selection of the mediator and goes, can you do this case? Do you have any conflicts? No, I can do it. And you go, okay. Dave Puckett talks a lot. Here's his emotional intelligence thing. And Patty, she's real rational and her most out there. And by the way, they went through a series of e-negotiation, and they're so close. Yeah. Then when that mediator walks in the room, he or she is going to be 10 times more effective. Now, and that's true whether it's the mediation is online because it's on video conferencing, or if it's video conferencing for 1 or 2 sessions, so no one has to drive. Everybody saves a little bit of time, saves a little bit of money, and then goes and gets into the room. Because all they want to do is move the rest of the stuff in the red over to the blue, and then you got a settlement statement, and it can be generated and spit out from the system. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And is there a demo on your website? Your website being ResolvNow, so folks, it's ResolvNow.com. And you also have Settle Now, which is just like it sounds, settle-now.com. Is there a demo that folks can watch on how that works? If a consumer goes on there or someone who wants to use that and they say, I'm not really sure about this, is there something they can watch that walks them through those steps?
Yes and no, Patty. Come January, the answer is absolutely.
January's the key here.
No, and I'm not saying it. Look, I've had a series of talks the last 2 months with some of the people who have been in this industry since early 2000. I've only been in it since 2009. Colin Rule, Ethan Katz, Dan Rainey, all these names we all know. They wrote books about this stuff in early 2000. We're in 2015, and it hadn't really taken off. We made a decision in 2014 to launch Settle Now. And we've taken some criticism, but I think it's the criticism is right because we kind of wanted to create some competitive confusion. We attempted to talk. We see it broken down to 3 elements of the consumer or of the business: the individual or consumer, depending on how you want to brand them; businesses offering services to their clients to easier to resolve conflicts; and then the courts, attorneys, and law firms. Our engine works the same, but yet each one of those categories, the 3, individuals, businesses, of course, are going to start and deal with the conflict slightly different, or how they're going to charge for it, or how they're going to allow the consumer. As an example, Patty, 99% of all contracts have a mediation clause. We know that. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, from our point of view, and shared amongst a lot of people, and I'm not making fun of a wonderful and respected institution like the American Arbitration Association. I'm going to say this in humor. I've actually heard this said. You read your clause in your you got a contract with a business or individual, and you go, okay, I think there's a mediation clause in this thing somewhere. In theory, we know what that means. So we're going to go to mediation. You go read it. It probably reads something like this. If we have a conflict, we agree to mediate or arbitrate, and we're going to do so within the best practices of the American Arbitration Association, or the AAA.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. Good. A very respected organization like AAA. But to the average consumer, you know what I've heard them say? Yeah, I got one of those cards in my wallet. They think it's the American Automobile Association, right? They don't even know what the AAA, let alone best practices of mediation are, or whatever. So they're lost. Now, and maybe some listeners that are attorneys, and I love them, and they serve their clients very well. But listen, until we can make the mediation clause understandable, we can't expect them to do. And so that's and again, I think that's one of the biggest obstacles. We can't make the mediation clause or arbitration mediation clause even understandable that a consumer can go, this is what we do. So what we've done is we've written much more simple mediation clauses. We did, some of our attorneys did, and whether it's Modry or virtual courthouse or whether it's just, anyway, why couldn't it say something like this? If there's a conflict, we agree within 90 days to do so on one of the commercial systems like Modry, virtual courthouse, and settlenow.com. Because at least they can go look at it. They can say, well, this costs this. This is how this works. We got to push them to the trough before they're going to drink. Now, you brought up something. We failed, Patty. We've also failed, and we can. And again, I laugh at myself regularly. ResolvNow is a parent company of a few subsidiaries, of which our primary product is SettleNow. So in 2016, I've just changed my business card, guys, real recently. I'm SettleNow. SettleNow is going to be our brand. This is how we're writing our mediation clauses. So ResolvNow really means nothing except for it's a business entity, a business organization that owns that. We're trying to do SettleNow Europe. It's going to be a completely different subsidiary in most companies in the technology business and delivery of technology services. When you go into these other economies, it's not unusual to do a subsidiary arrangement. So SettleNow. And we actually, it's done now. It'll launch sometime prior to the first year.
And will that be the settle-now.com? Will that be the correct website address?
Absolutely. And that's really the only one. I mean, you and I talked about so much, but to your listeners, that's what I want to drive home. If you go look at settlenow.com today, you can laugh at it because I do. It does say consumers. It does have those vertical business buttons. It does say a lawyer. But guess what? The new version, and I think, again, it's our maturation as a company, and I think it's part of the industry, is we need to commoditize, and we need to talk to the individual and go, you know what, you guys can use this, and you don't even need an attorney. For cases that economically that 60% are not served, sorry, attorney, we can build something to do this without involving you and without necessarily a lawsuit. Example, like small claims. But it can scale up from the limits on small claims. Second, businesses. I mentioned the AAA earlier, the American Automobile Association. Why couldn't they offer something like that? Why couldn't they offer something like SettleNow to their members? Why couldn't AARP offer it to their members? Why can't these professional organizations recognize that there's a better way to resolve the conflict, write more simple language mediation clauses, and then give the client, the disputing party, your cellular contract, right? Everybody hates those things. I'm tied to 2 years. And what? You know what? If we've got a conflict, here's how we do it. And then lastly, the courts, the law firms, and the individual attorneys. Sorry, folks, you can't kill me. Mediation is here, and they're doing it. Do it better. Do it more affordable. Do it more simply. Give the clients the option to do that first, but also retain you. It just becomes a different way to serve their client. and let me end with this. I think this is a key point. I shared this one with you, and I think you and I related this. I was one of the original architects of what is today Realtor.com, okay, in the real estate industry. And that launched, if my memory is correct, I want to say about 1996 or 97 time frame. I will never forget this, guys. The biggest fear amongst the realtor community was, oh my gosh, if we put the address of the listing of the house on the internet, they're going to bypass us as realtors and just go knock on the door to say, hey, when does your listing expire so we can save the 6 or 7% commission and just buy it because we now have the technology. The technology generate community. Now, the real estate community was one of the first on the internet. It's been 20 years. Guess what? There's still a realtor on every corner. 99% of all the real estate transactions are still closed in a real estate traditional mechanism than that. Everybody's still making the same money. They're serving their clients better and different, and they're using the internet. Why are we scared of this in the mediation industry or the legal industry? Why will attorneys not go, you know what? We can make money, but differently. We just got to serve our clients differently.
So,
I get passionate about that.
Yes, exactly. I love hearing your passion, but and we are at the end of our program, actually, so we do need to wrap up here. And I thank you so much for sharing what your expertise and what you've been learning over the years about technology and how that's going to change. I'm also excited for you that you're going to be having an evolution, if you will, of your own website of settlenow.com. And the final, kind of just to summarize everything here as we close, is one that what I've really heard you say over the course of this is for consumers, whatever the consumer's dispute is or the business, the individual, the business, et cetera, how do we make access to justice easy? How can we make it easy to use online, meaning the technology, and how can we make it affordable to the everyday consumer? But the other thing, which is what you've been talking about all along throughout this theme, is the messaging. How do we message it so that consumers understand the value of it to them, so that they themselves aren't afraid or confused to use these new online platforms that are popping up all over the world. And we won't even talk about the European Union. We had a show on that already about the direction that they're going in, and that's for another show. But we've been talking a lot about what's going on in the European Union and the requirement of online dispute resolution technology. So, folks. So, David, as your final message, and thank you again for being part of our Cyber Style series. Again, listeners, settle. settle-now.com is the current website and the new launch of your website in January. So, David, what's your final message to our listeners tonight?
Well, Patty, this last 3 or 4 weeks, we've hired some of the best branding and some of the best messaging people, and they've been coaching us on a new message. And I'll call it the Uberization. Uber came out of nowhere. They reinvented the transportation industry. And that's what we're trying to do. And Uber, if you look at the Uber site, you can almost get on it, and it's so darn simple to set up your account, and then start getting transportation. And it's graphical, and it's just great. And I don't care what age you are, you love it. That's our challenge, and we were doing a poor job at it. And it's Uber is an on-demand business. It's reinvented a business by being on demand. That's what we have to do in this industry.
Very good. Well, thank you again for sharing your ideas and your thoughts about your technology, enhanced dispute resolution. The best to you, and we'll definitely continue these conversations on Twitter at TX Conflict Coach. And thank you, David, very much for joining the program, and thank you for those who joined us in the chat room tonight and joined us in our Twitter feed. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you enjoyed the program. You can find all of our podcasts archived to listen at your convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can also become a Facebook fan of Conflict Connection or Twitter me at TX Conflict Coach.